Look at what's happening right now in Canada and the United Kingdom. Two countries, same warning signs. Cost of living through the roof, housing out of reach, public services stretched thin, and governments that seem more focused on managing headlines than fixing problems. Different flags, same frustrations. And here's the question. Are these isolated failures, or are we watching the same political thinking produce the same results on both sides of the Atlantic? Today, we're going to talk to a local candidate in England who's seeing this up close, and what they're fighting for might sound very familiar to Canadians, because this isn't just their story, it's ours too. And I am delighted to welcome to the remote studio all the way across the pond, Steve Swift. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Love to talk a bit of politics.
Well, this is the thing. I know you through a number of other podcasts in a completely different realm, but it becomes really apparent really quickly that your understanding of what's going on in politics in the UK makes you a perfect candidate to kind of align for this. So I do appreciate it. And we'll take a little walk. I should mention, if you notice a bit of a delay, it's because we have connected our internet in England and our internet in Canada via potato wire for today. So you have to forgive us.
It's me. I'm very slow. That's all it is.
You know what? We'll just take our time with one another. Steve, I think that out of the gate, the one thing that I will say is that I noticed that Canadians and the British have a lot in common right now. We're suffering in the same ways in many ways. We have some of the same plights that are obvious, and they've been fast arriving to both of our countries. And, also we have the influence over us of fairly liberal thinking governments that are looking out for everybody simultaneously and seemingly getting nowhere. But if you don't mind, I'll start with kind of just give us the picture. What I'm seeing in Canada on television and through social media and YouTube and things like that is a society that is reacting to way too much immigration without preparation, way more asylum population than was expected. Am I off base here?
No, but I need to, I suppose, add the caveat that this is, what I'm particularly interested in is the narrative. In today's social media world, where you can announce a policy on X and you don't need to follow through, you just announce it and it's done, then the narrative is the most important thing. And that part of the migration issue that you mentioned is something that the Labour Party is struggling with. The Tory party before them struggled with that. And there are other newer parties that are making a lot of headway because of that, some may say.
Yeah, well, that's true. There are some pretty outlandish representatives of the far right, anti-immigration group that, of course, is bubbling to the top because they tend to speak louder and fill the streets with their message. But overall, I think there has been a certain amount of pressure on the economy, on services. It's probably not unfounded. And so even though there is a narrative that is fairly negative toward asylum, there are some realities, I think, also that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't deny that. And, there are a lot of people who, there's a big, I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but there's a big phrase in Britain, which is, just by talking about that, I shouldn't be seen as racist. Now, it's about shutting down debate, and we need to have that debate. So, yeah, that's something which people feel. It is something that's real for people. Quite a lot of this happened in Tony Blair's government, but there was a lot more money around at that time. It might be borrowed money, but because there was a lot more money around, it felt different. Now it feels like everything's really stretched and there is no money, and we're being told that regularly.
What a fantastic perspective through the Tony Blair lens, because you're right. That is really when so much migration took place in Europe, certainly to Britain. And I can imagine at that time it seemed sustainable, that it seemed like the right thing to do. And by the way, I should point out, Steve, even in Canada, I mean, there is, we have this feeling that immigration spun out of control, which it did. And now we understand how and what happened there. Not all of it was good. I promise you that. There was a certain amount of corruption. And frankly, there was a lot of missteps that have really affected the migrant themselves, the asylum seeker, the immigrant. We promise them more than we can deliver to them right now. And I wonder if that's sort of the same feeling, not putting the blame on a migrant themselves who made their way into a country that was welcoming them in.
Yeah, I think that during the Blair years, the globalization, forced wages down, all of that was still, we struggled through that too. That was clearly something that happened, but there was, as I say, a lot more money around. Now, I don't think that there isn't a feeling in this country that we promise people things, that we promise people who come here things. There is a feeling, certainly in this country, that we're not getting people, I suppose, paperwork's and booked in. Paperwork's not a word, is it? But it is
No,
now.
no, but
Um,
I think we bring it into the vernacular.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of private companies who are doing the booking of all of this, and it's taking an awful long time. And
Right.
people feel that. Now, someone like me would say quite glibly, just take it back in, take Border Force back into government. It's not that easy. Not after Tony Blair's government, there he is again, and the public private partnership stuff. But my feeling is it would run better if it was taken in. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm quite a big, nationalization person. But there is a feeling that people aren't being processed quickly enough. And I don't know if we have, the narrative is that we don't really have enough of a clear view um of what we're going to do. Although we do have a new Home Secretary who is more
Mhm.
hardline. Um, and that is a bit of a sea change for us. And there's less kind of grumbling because
Mm.
she makes strong phrases and says quite strong things. And so people are not, there's not so much ferment, but you still have those parties who are talking about migration. And it's a central plank of their work. And they're doing very well, one in particular in this country.
Do you care to name the one in particular? I don't think it will surprise anybody.
It's reform. They're a
Yeah,
populist right-wing party. They have other policies, sure. They have a very charismatic leader in Nigel Farage, Trump's great mate, apparently. Um,
apparently.
he's a good bloke to have a pint with, apparently, and a game of Skittles in the local pub. He wears a lot of tweed, all that kind of stuff, and a flat cap. So he's just like you and me. All of that. I don't fall for that. It may be that that's exactly what he's like, but I don't fall for that. Um, Quite a businessman, um, and people at the top, it seems, of reform appear to be businessmen. But in this country, we quite like that. Why don't we get businessmen to run our economy? Surely they're the ones to do it. So they've really had a good time as an insurgent party, a bit like Trump, in his first run, when he was, I've come from nowhere, folks. Well, you know me from TV, but I'm not political. I'm a breath of fresh air. Now, in
Right.
this second run, he's kind of aware of what he's doing a bit more, but Reform did very well in local councils. The national MPs, members of parliament, they have four, with a fifth apparently coming back to Reform, I hear today. I didn't
Oh,
even know he'd
crossing the
gone.
floor. We have a bit of that going on in Canada as well right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, a bit of
yeah,
crossing the floor from party to party. It's been a disturbance in the political air for sure.
and it's, I mean, for us, that's the Tories losing quite a lot of high-profile MPs to Reform. Is that the way it is for you?
Much the same. We're seeing conservatives crossing the floor over to the Liberal Party, two very distinct posts. It feels like a lot of backroom dealing going on. That it's very much I guess, a route toward majority government, where we're very close here in the country. But yeah, over the last several months, we've seen several occasions.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the same thing here. It's stopped at the moment. But the thing about reform is that they could call themselves an insurgent party. You know, we're new and we're fresh and we speak your language. And they do speak an awful lot of people's language. And I can understand that entirely. But there's now a feeling that we've got local elections coming up and they won a lot of local elections. So that's the councils that run cities and towns in England and Britain. And they've been there now, so people can now say, it's harder to rule and to run a council than it is to win a council. So there's quite a lot more that people can say. So we have
Oh,
a
interesting.
rateable system called the council tax, and they've put that up in the narrative is they've put that up quite a lot, even though on their leaflets. And I watched a news program last night where Nigel Farage was being shown the leaflets. Here's you smiling, saying you're not going to put council tax up. Here's you more serious, saying you're not going to put council tax up. Why have you done that? So once you get in, it's a lot harder to
Well,
to
yeah.
govern. And the Labour Party, our leading Labour Party, are feeling that too.
Yeah, I think that we see that in many governments. I think that in Canada, of course, we have Mark Carney, and you're not unfamiliar with Mark Carney there in England. A lot of what we're seeing is a corporate approach to running government, which makes that's sort of a different approach than we've seen here in Canada. I would imagine that that's the opposite of what you're experiencing.
Yeah, that's interesting actually. What we get is, I shout and scream and cavil and grouse about the news, which is not what do you think, but what do you feel? And
Yeah.
we've got Keir Starmer, who's our prime minister, who's a real he appears to be, and I keep saying this because it's all about the narrative for me. He appears to be a bleeding heart, a real bleeding heart. He's even when he was in opposition and when it looked like he was going to have a thumping majority, and he did, he looked frightened.
Yeah.
Um, and he's looked frightened until recently. And that's to do with the current war. And he's probably doing something that Britons might want at the moment, the majority of Britons, perhaps.
Well, I think that that's kind of next on my agenda with you. Actually, was the immediate connection to your economy, much like us. What your military will do, what your position will be alongside the NATO approach to what's happening in Iran. What's the feeling that you're getting from your government?
Uh, the feeling is that they've actually played a bit of a blinder, and I can only talk from my own personal view and other people I talk to. That's changed somewhat because what Keir Starmer did first was he kind of said, "Remember Tony Blair's Iraq War? That man again, Tony Blair's Iraq War, illegal. It was a terrible situation. Lots of people lost their lives for lots of different countries. I don't want to go into a war that's illegal." And he held off for some time with all the brickbats from Trump of, we used to have a special relationship. Fantastic. Now I don't know if it's such a good relationship. All that stuff.
Great,
And
great Trump. Great
I,
Trump. Well done, Steve.
I can't do
I
much
like
of
it.
it.
Some people think that it's not a great impersonation. I love it myself.
It's
Well done, Steve.
fantastic. Everybody says so. It's never been better. And he took that, but then recently he sent a destroyer, I think around the Strait of Hormuz.
Mhm.
So that made me think, well, it's too little too late because Trump said too little too late. And why would you do that when you were getting some plaudits for people saying, yeah, he's not a puppet. He's not Trump's puppet. And considering our economy is really going to struggle if this continues for much longer with oil prices, and it's all doom and gloom in our news programs around that, then I think he's got nothing to lose by saying to Trump, don't want to do that with you. That's something that people have been saying for ages with Keir Starmer, doesn't have that much of a backbone. They've done lots of flips on and turnabouts on their policies. So him standing up to Trump was great, but he's
So,
kind of changed that now.
well, it's interesting that we have a similar scenario. We didn't see Mark Carney here jumping up and down, getting into a U-boat to head over with Trump. We saw him taking measured steps toward discussion about it and how can we be more of a protectorate than an offensive force, and waited long enough to have Trump doing the same thing. I don't know what you guys are doing, if you're helping at all, but very much the same approach. And I think Canadians would have appreciated us staying completely out of it. Maybe that's not the case. And just focusing on what we need to do here at home for our economy. But also, we see this flip flopping that you're seeing with Starmer. I mean, it's very interesting to me that we're both experiencing this on policies that revolve around international business, international law, and international defense.
Yeah, and stuff gets lost because this is the headline. So um, recently, what the Labour government have done is they have safeguarded, they've set out um, rules and guidelines to safeguard steel, to safeguard AI, to safeguard main manufacturing too, particularly steel. And that's something which has been not looked after for many years. That's something extraordinary that he has done and that the Labour Party has done. And I think there's only me who's talking about it. So that gets lost in the ballyhoo and the hoo-ha of all this stuff. Um, and the narrative of, well, he's weak, but actually he is making deals. Um, we just get lost in the war of it all.
It's interesting. I spent 2 or 3 weeks really bitching and moaning about our prime minister traveling the world and spending $90,000 on lunch and taking a brand new airplane that our military built for him all over the place. Some fabulous places, Japan, Rome. Oh my goodness. I mean, he went to Norway. He really had quite a whirlwind tour. And in my mind, that was a banker living the big life. I'm going to tell you that I had to kind of correct myself a little bit on this. I'm no Jim Lang, by the way, guys. I still have a reserved judgment on our prime minister. Having said that, I did have to take a step to the side and see, okay, we've increased business in Canada almost $100 billion, just taking non-tariff business from all the rest of the world and setting things up. And it's all the countries that he had been to. Now, I don't know if that was coincidental or just enforced it or something happened, but it's certainly not part of the narrative. Even the Liberals in Canada are really great at telling you what we've done. And I think that lack of communication in our country makes us think, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, we have the same thing. I presume that Mark Carney sent you some postcards. Here's me at the Eiffel Tower. Here's me at the Taj
Yeah.
Mahal. I hope he did. But
Strangely, Steve, none of those arrived.
maybe they're just lost in the post. They're coming.
Okay.
They're coming.
Okay.
I mean, it's the same thing here, really, because we did actually make a big ballyhoo of Starmer saying, okay, I'm going to China. I'm going to China. Let's have a look at that. Let's see what we can do there. Now, people said, well, what can you do there? But actually, it's good to open that up. Now, there are some issues around that country. We know that, but economy is supposed to go everywhere, isn't it? And if you're a capitalist, then it's supposed to go everywhere. So all of that, well, I'm just going to go here. I don't need to ask Trump's permission to do that. I'm just going to go and speak to these people. That kind of stuff gets lost in the mix. It was reported, but nobody picks it up because the narrative is he's frightened and he should have been bolder.
Starmer went to China as well.
Yeah. So he's been cuddling up. Yeah, he's been giving kind of first overtures, if you like. So nothing's come of that. But he's done all of he is doing work around business. So that kind of stuff, it just gets lost because the general consensus, maybe it's just my algorithms, the general consensus is that I see, well, nah, it's soon time to get him out. He's a weak prime minister. That's all stopped over the past few weeks, by the way, but he's a weak prime minister. There'll be a coup. He'll be out before the end of his term. and we'll either have the health minister or the deposed Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner in. So it, it's that he's very weak and that he can't really run this country. He's more of a he's like when we came out of the war and we had Clement Attlee. Let me take you back. I'm very old. So when we came out of the war and we needed, Winston Churchill helped us to win the war, as did many others. But the British public said, "That's enough now, Winston. Don't need you. I need someone who's a caretaker to bring this country back." And that's the way that Keir Starmer feels. And people don't think he's bold enough. Now people have said that so often, I don't know if he can come back from that.
I don't know if his timing's good on that. I don't know if it's a comeback time. I think that it's a come to Jesus moment globally. Trump has put us all in an economic situation. There's a war going on that nobody seems sure of what we're doing against a very major and rife opponent that appears to not have any desire to give up. This may not be a time for raising up the ranks, as it were, in either of our countries. It's really a time to be making accommodation for what's happening.
Yeah, and partially, it's a terrible thing to say, but economically, the war helps him because you're right. When he was elected, people were just sick of the Tories. They'd
Yeah.
had so many prime ministers in a very short period of time, and there was no money. And I think they thought we need someone just to steady the ship here. But very, very early on, Labour said, "There's no money. What are we going to do? There's no money." And part of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, who's disliked from what I can see in general, certainly for her business policies. What she can now say is, well, growth isn't going to happen in the way I expected it to, and that's because of the war. Now, I'm not saying you blame the war, but it allows her some coverage.
A little
People
bit of
say,
latitude. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's good for her because she's been through the mill, and actually was getting a bit stronger before this happened. But she has been through the mill. I think the only person who's in the government who's being given more latitude, as you say, is our health secretary, Wes Streeting, and that's because when he got there, we love our NHS in this country, and it really is struggling,
Hmm.
and it's been underfunded. But then you pour money into it, as the Blair government poured money into it. It helped to a certain extent, but people thought that Wes Streeting would sell everything off. We would have an insurance kind of policy deal. And he didn't. So he's quite well liked. He's one of the only ones in that Labour government who seems quite well liked by the voting public.
Let's talk about your health care. We are inundated. We have wait times in our emergency rooms. We have the unavailability of doctors, the inability for people to reach out to specialists in a timely fashion, and it's costing lives and taking a toll on our health as a nation. How you guys doing over there?
Not great. Not great. I mean, it's a similar picture. Plus, what we've also got is strikes as well. So, the junior doctors are currently striking. And the issue for me is that, as a long-time trade unionist, the issue for me is that those junior doctors, people have said, and I need to do the research on this, that they earn as much as a manager in a supermarket, not denigrating managers in a supermarket, but
No.
these are junior doctors who can make life or death decisions and life-changing decisions. So I can understand why they're a little bit cheesed off that they're not getting the money that they need and
Well,
want.
not to mention they just came out of school, which has cost them bundles and bundles and bundles of money.
Sure,
They need to see the way through.
sure. And we are struggling. We're struggling, in the same way that you said. People, there's quite a lot of corridor care, as we call people on
That's what,
gurneys,
yeah, yeah.
trolleys, corridor care. There's huge waiting times. There are hospitals saying it's nearly a critical incident, or it is critical. And we're trying to do other things around walk-in centres and sort of quicker care buildings. but it's a patchy picture, and you can pour lots of money into this, and governments have. That last Labour government did, and some of the waiting times came down. But it needs a fundamental look at perhaps the management of that. That's the narrative here. Management of that. You need to get back to services on the ground. Um, yeah, it's in a mess, but we love our NHS. You will not get very much traction if you stand in the middle of a square and say, let's privatise the whole thing. Let's have an
Right.
insurance policy. You know, Nigel Farage said that quite some time ago, and it's still coming back to haunt him.
You know, from healthcare, let me make a quick jump over to something you just mentioned, how you'd be unpopular, uh, you know, speaking out against healthcare in Canada. We have very good professional people doing amazing things with healthcare as well. And I think that they're just, frankly, a lot of the sectors of healthcare are underrepresented in budgets properly. We're in a situation, and I'll take it to this place as well. Much like England, our GDP is down, our inflation is up, and we're not really making anything. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you make a hell of a breakfast in England. What else are you guys making right now? You've got steel. What else? What are you exporting? Well, I mean, right now we should be exporting in Canada oil and energy and LNG and minerals. We are the most mineral-rich place on earth. We do none of that. How about that in the UK?
We're in the same situation. So, I spoke to somebody the other day who said, well, we're opening up North Sea oil, aren't we? Yeah, but we need to see how that works. We have an awful lot of oil, and some may say that, during the Thatcher government in the 80s, the profits of that oil, some say, conspiracy theorists say, well, that went to pay the welfare bill, all of that. Some
Right.
say that. I don't know an enormous amount of what we export. Steel would be something. Steel
Yeah.
would be something that we've always been
But Steve,
incredibly good at.
if either of us, if either of our countries were doing anything significant, both of us be saying, we're doing wheat. Oh, we've got soy. We're doing this. We're doing no, but neither. We're both sitting here going, okay, we have steel. We have LNG, but we're doing nothing with it. Oh, we have oil, but we're late to the game overall globally, apparently. And that would be helpful right now to provide petrol, as you guys love to call it. It's okay to say gas. Uh, we could all, that's where I think we have a similar moment right now. We both could use our oil domestically.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't say gas because gas sounds like I'm farting. So we do
Oh,
say
fair enough.
petrol,
No,
uh,
no,
you
that's
know,
fair.
but I'm feeling that way a bit now. I have my own gas, which keeps me nice and warm, certainly in one area. But I think
That's not LNG, by the way.
no, I can't sell it on. I wish I could. I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right that um, manufacturing is virtually non-existent. Is the narrative? It's small businesses, virtually non-existent. You had an enormous amount of coal, and we have a problem in this government because we're looking um, to create some kind of capitalism through and the economy through green um, green work and green manufacturing. That's not really taken off yet, but we have an energy minister who's desperate for all of that.
Look,
Um,
I'm going to caution you to get rid of that energy minister right now. You will be making nothing before the end of the month ever again that requires any sort of machinery to do it. And
well, this is
if you hear the phrase net zero, run. Get the hell out of England.
well, the issue is that people say, and I have said it myself, we're an island. Why can't we have wind power? Well, it's not just about that. It's not just about talking about that. It's incredibly expensive. And it will pay off. But with such short political cycles, no one is going to stand there and say
Ah,
this will pay off in 20 years' time
yeah.
because they won't be there. So they used to say this in times gone by, and as I say, I'm very old, but I remember this. But no one's going to say that now. It has to pay off next year.
Okay, look, before we get out of here, there's one topic I want to get to, and you can bail out, you can pull the eject cable if you wish. I'm concerned about hate laws. I should start by saying shouldn't hate one another. Let's start with love, okay? But some of the laws that I'm seeing in Britain and arrests being made, I saw a number where there's like 30,000 arrests, or one arrest every 30 minutes that is based on speech law, hate law, and what people are saying online. That's a little disturbing to me, Steve.
And you should be disturbed, but you should also understand that what and I'm not denying this is happening, because it clearly is happening. It's being reported quite a lot. Um,
Mhm.
but what I don't like is certain organizations and certain people who belong to organizations who use that to create hate. So, you do have woke versus supposedly, and I'll do this, ordinary people. So you've got that kind of anti-woke stuff going on. Um, that's something that lots of people use, and they utilize it to make a lot of political commerce with it. So
Oh my God,
yes,
I
it
love that
happens.
perspective. Yeah, I love, you know what? Sorry, Steve. I love that perspective. That's good fuel for hate. I do understand, right? But removing those laws and letting society understand each other in a discussion, I think, there's got to be a happy medium there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's something we need to struggle to find. And, social media has done all of that. But it's easy for me to sit here in my well-upholstered chair and say, okay, yeah, it's social media. Yes, there's been a knee-jerk reaction, I believe, to all of this. But there's quite a lot of, well, the police don't arrest anybody anymore because they're all looking at social media
Yeah.
and trying to arrest people who make posts. Now,
I don't
there
know if
is some
that's
of that.
true, but I get it.
There,
Yeah.
there- yeah, people say it, and there is some of that, but I don't. eh, I suppose I would say, wouldn't I, being a kind of left-leaning person, that um, there are a lot of people making commerce out of it, but it cannot be denied that you let that genie out of the bottle, and people start to worry, and people start to say, "I can't say anything." I, I get an awful lot of comments. Of course, you couldn't say that now, and I grew up in the '70s, and of course, you couldn't say that now. No, but we need a discussion about all of that. And it's
Right.
not, you shouldn't be slapped down either metaphorically or physically because you're having a discussion about that. We need to talk about it so that, and we used to meet in the bar or the pub, and somebody would say something and somebody would come back with, and it's immediate real time stuff, isn't it? On social
Right.
media,
Ah,
you don't
you're
get any of
crazy.
that.
What are you talking about? Oh, well, am I
Yeah.
crazy? You have your side now. Oh, and I'll have
Yeah.
my side, and we'll have a pint, and everybody will go home.
That's right, and you might not put the world to rights, but somebody might say, "I've not thought about that way before." That's great, but you won't get that kind of dissenting view. And I have gone on Twitter or X, um, and said in the past, "Look, I believe it's this," but you can't have a conversation because everybody's being endorsed by their own followers and by their own algorithms and by their own people. So you can't have that real time discussion, and people can say what they like because they're avatars. So it's difficult, but we do need to have that discussion. And I know that political parties, being part of a political party in the past, um, and I know this happens, will not campaign and knock on doors in certain areas or on certain streets because I know what their politics are. Well, actually, I'd like to knock on that door and say, why are you a Tory? Why do you vote for the Lib Dems? Why don't you vote for? So I'd like to have that conversation, but machine politics doesn't let you do that, and social media doesn't let you do that either.
No, that's clearly the truth. As we talk about narratives, we shouldn't. I mean, the reality is, you're on the left, I'm on the right. We should have set that up better on this video. But having said that, look, we have had a completely reasonable conversation where both of us aren't far off the middle. We want what's best and reasonable. We don't want extremes. We want to see the government doing something for the majority of people. But without a conversation like we're having right now, how do you ever find that solution?
This is the problem, because and I'm part of this. I think, we're part of this. You've got, because of social media and everything else, you've got citizen journalists. So you don't have any kind of outlet that you look up to. We had probably about 10 years ago, which is one of the reasons why people are cynical about politicians in my country. We had a story broken by a national newspaper, the Financial Times, the pink newspaper, which I read because nobody lies to money. So they did great investigative reporting and found that quite a lot, an enormous amount of MPs were claiming things that they shouldn't be claiming. Plugs for their baths, and as you said earlier with Mark Carney, huge amounts of travel and lunches and all of that, toilet paper, things like that. It ran and ran this, and people have not come back from that. That allows citizen journalists to say, well, these people have got feet of clay, all these MPs. I'm the one you should really be thinking about, because I'm charismatic and I can make a difference. And they can make a difference on social media. That's the extraordinary and frightening thing at the same time. And that's why we can't coalesce in the center, because the center is all about, oh, yeah, it's machine politics, and we all know what happens there. Whereas on the left, the far left, and the further right, it looks free and exciting, and social media. And that's something which I don't know how you combat that. I really don't.
It's so funny. The reality is right in the middle there again, right? The reality of how you have to run a government, how you have to run a nation, how you have to have diplomacy with other people, how you handle immigration and feeding and welfare and all those. Those are the hard cogs in the wheel that, you wrap this rubber around the spokes of that wheel that really soften the reality of what's going on and what's structurally holding up the cart. And so I can respect that. And I think that it's easy. I sit here, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, criticizing what the government does, at the same time, fully understanding that it's a hard job and there are a lot of good people doing it. It's the fraction of people that are doing the corruption or pushing too far on woke or too far on the right, too far on the left. That, I think, is the disease in politics that finds its way into the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and it affects the centre of politics. So it affects that. The reform has affected politics. It's affected both the Tory party, the Labour Party. It's affected them, the Greens, who have fought against that and are doing better. So, it's affected that, and it will continue to do so. And that social media, which feeds in, will also affect that.
He's been a politician. He does a heck of a discussion on fighting, just to see if he doesn't. My guest today has been Steve Swift. You're a lovely guy, and I can't wait. I hope we can do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that, because I don't get to talk about politics with people who are so sagacious and intelligent as yourself, sir.
Well, my goodness, that's the first time. The comments will certainly have something contrary to say about that. I will say this. I have an idea that you and I could take on. This could be a project for you and I. When we were in high school, you used to have exchange programs. A kid from England would come to Canada. A kid from Canada would go to England. Why don't we swap prime ministers just for a week and see how things go?
I would love that. We love Mark Carney here. He's a pin-up. I had a poster on my wall. He's fantastic. We love him. He's our thin Superman.
Well, you know what? I'm happy to send him your way for even just one more week. I wouldn't be surprised if he's there right now anyway. I think he's got a house much nicer than the one in Canada. Steve, thank you so much. Be well.
You too, mate. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat. It's been lovely.
Patriotic means looking out for each other and fixing things together.
True patriotism is being in the country you love, surrounded by people you love, and great weather.
Being a patriot is being a part of your community and caring for it.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Patriotism is the one thing we all share.
It's okay to be critical of government and still be a patriot.
It's gratitude to your country.
Of course I'm a patriot. I'm Canadian. It's my home.
Well, actually, true patriot love is the mission.